You see, having a sports celebrity in the bar is great for business. You take a look at your major places in Atlantic City. They got your Willie Mays, your Mickey Mantle.
It seems the critical difference here is that I've heard of those people.
Wait a second here. You know, a lot of people may not know this, but I happen to be quite famous.
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Stanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I'm going to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what are we talking about today?
The stalwart...
I like it. Keep going.
Sitcom daddy at this point,
wow,
Ted
okay.
Danson.
Zaddy, some might say. I've heard murmurs on the street. The Sitcoms of Ted Danson. We're doing another actor spotlight deep dive like we've done in the past with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Ms. Melissa Joan Hart. This one was your idea, so why don't you talk for a little bit? Why did you think that Theodore Q. Danson, not his real name, is worthy of our attention?
Well, so he has been on television for basically our entire lifetime, right? He was in Cheers that started in like 82, 83, something like that, ran until the mid 90s. Then he had Becker a few years later, which I also watched. He's done a bunch of stuff. You know, he was on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yes. He was in, I think he was in Damages even. He was in a couple of different things on HBO for a while.
Bored to Death, sure.
Yeah, Bored to Death. And then he's had a few other like failure to launch kind of sitcoms that ran for like a season or half a season. And then he was in The Good Place in like 2015, I think that started, which was amazing. And now he's got a new one, right? Or no, he was in Mr. Mayor for a couple of years. It was like a 2-year arc. And then now he's got a new one, The Man Inside, which is putting him back together with Mike Schur, who did The Good Place.
Yeah, The Man Inside is a Netflix, we haven't watched it, we should say. We didn't cover that one, but that looks like one of these that's, like half-hour comedy that's sort of like what has become of the sitcom now, probably a little more cinematic. Yeah, Ted Danson is an interesting one for me. Growing up at the time that I did, we were both born in 79, so we lived through Cheers, but like I talked about many times in the many times we've covered it, for me, that was a show about grown-ups. I wasn't tuning in when I was 7, 8 years old to watch a TV show about some womanizer who owned a bar, and dealing with his other friends in their 30s and 40s. For me, my first experience with Ted Danson was 3 Men and a Baby.
Right.
And it's interesting.
That was like 87.
Yeah. And then, of course, the follow-up, 3 Men and a Little Lady. He also has a very memorable segment in the original Creepshow movie, which is this anthology horror series. His segment is all about being buried in the sand by Leslie Nielsen because he slept with his wife. So always playing the cad, always playing the womanizer.
Well, he is this former basketball star. He went to Stanford before he decided to transfer to Carnegie Mellon because he got into acting. Like, he is a very smart, well-educated man. I think his father was like a professor of archaeology or something. His dad was basically Indiana Jones. I mean, he's like, he is well-bred, as they say, and he is tall for Hollywood because he's 6'2".
He's tall and he has a huge ass head.
He does have a giant head.
As I was watching him, I was thinking, why did they not make the movie with him and Mickey Rourke as brothers? Like,
because
both of
Mickey
these
Rourke
guys
has a giant head too.
They have foreheads that look, not to be mean, these guys are very handsome men. They look like Star Trek characters with the forehead plate added to their head for like the Klingon
Ted Danson,
thing.
speaking of, Ted Danson is one of the very few actors that hasn't gone bald.
He hasn't gone bald. He has very interesting hair. I always thought as a kid, he's one of these guys that, like when I was a little kid watching Three Men and a Baby and stuff, he might as well have been 70 years old. He just had that old dude vibe. And of course, now I watch all these things. He's younger than I am now, but he's got kind of like a grizzled texture to him. His hair, like he's
always looked like a grown-up.
Yes.
He never had that like boyish young guy look.
Boyish was never his thing. But yeah, I find it interesting that, he did have this, I say somewhere between successful and not movie career in the 90s.
Yeah,
it's funny.
He would shoot things on his breaks from Cheers, and they had a draw because he was Sam from Cheers.
Yeah, and Cheers ended eventually, and he's one of these guys, like he's sitcom royalty. And even if nothing that he did ever really hit as well again, he was always a presence. It's just interesting to me. People always talk about how, back in the 80s, 90s, back before now, basically, there was this like brick wall between being a TV star and a movie star. And it was so rare. Robin Williams was the only one that could do it. Nobody else could ever cross over.
Yeah,
but you look at
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, you look at these movies we're talking about, Tom
Michael J.
Selleck
Fox,
and Ted Danson. Well, he definitely.
Yeah.
But Danson and Selleck in Three Men and a Baby were both bouncing back and forth between movies and TV.
Yep.
And then Rebecca, as we'll get into, Kirstie Alley, my first experience with her was Look Who's Talking, another baby-related comedy of the 80s.
Like early 90s.
So yeah, it's funny. Like there was a lot of, maybe it was just Cheers. Cheers gave us Woody Harrelson, maybe Hollywood didn't mind drawing from Cheers for their talent pool.
Just don't tell. I mean, I guess even John Ratzenberger, right? He's
Toy Story.
He's a Pixar elite now.
So look, I guess what I'm going to say at the outset is that I was always familiar with Ted Danson as a kid. He represented this sort of handsome grown-up. I'm going to look to you to sort of provide the joy and light here, because I think my overall thing with Ted Danson is I got nothing against the guy, but none of his projects I particularly connected with. So as we go through these to different extents, like my reactions are going to be a little ho-hum. And so I sort of apologize in advance for being the Danson naysayer.
I'm shaking my head at you. You can celebrate all of Chachi's catalog, but you can't find a modicum of adoration.
Oh, I can find a modicum.
For Ted Danson.
We'll get a modicum.
Hold on. Let's just be clear. Ted Danson, now this is according to Wikipedia. I have not verified it by multiple sources, but Ted Danson is the only person in history to be a series regular on 12 different television shows. Wow. The man is like the most prolific TV star of our entire lifetime.
But that also means like 7 of those shows didn't do that well.
No, it's a lot of them because he went back and forth between dramas and sitcoms.
Okay, fair enough.
So he's been on 3 different CSIs playing the same character, right?
Those, yeah.
And so and those are, except for the CSI Cyber that only lasted for like one season. But yeah, and for him to be like a lot of the people that we have talked about have been on many, 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 many sitcoms. But like Jennifer Aniston, right? She was on a ton of sitcoms before she got Friends. And then she did Friends. And then that was it. And she was like, I'm moving on to something else. Ted Danson has this like work ethic of just like, I'm just going to do stuff that sounds cool. No parts too small. Yeah, I used to make, this much money on Cheers, but that was that. So now I'm going to take this big pay cut and do this because it looks interesting. Mike Schur, the creator of Good Place and The American Office and all these other things, right? He said it was like his lifelong dream. His 2 favorite actors growing up were Michael J. Fox. He's our age, obviously. Michael J. Fox and Ted Danson from Family Ties and Cheers. And he said it was like a long shot in the dark. He was like, let me just put it out there, offer The Good Place to him. And he didn't think a star as big as Danson would accept this part. part, he said, yes, absolutely, I'm in, and dream come true for a guy like Mike Schur. Like, how cool is that? I love the way that as his hair has gone white, he started taking on these more avuncular roles.
Yes.
It's really lovely to kind of see his trajectory.
Yeah, we'll get into that arc for sure, how his sort of persona changes a little bit. All right, let's get into it. What are our shows? And let's go down the path of Teddy Danson.
All right. So we're starting with Cheers, which was his first major role. You mentioned that he had a few other, he was in like that Creepshow movie. He had been a guest star in several things. We didn't watch it for this podcast because he has so many starring roles in shows, but he played the firefighter boyfriend of Laverne in Laverne and Shirley.
Wow.
In the very special episode of Laverne and Shirley where her firefighter boyfriend dies in a fire.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So like,
R.I.P.
Right. So, and that was in like, I think 1980. Right. So, I mean, he was on Magnum PI with his good buddy there, Tom Selleck, prior to doing the movie as well.
No Baby.
Yes,
Okay.
Exactly. So he's done lots of things, but anyway, all right, we'll get to it. Cheers. Season 6, episode 1, Home is the Sailor. We decided to go for the very first episode with Rebecca because, if you've listened to the podcast, we've done a deep dive on episode or seasons 1 through 5 with the Sam and Diane relationship. We also watched Becker, season 1, episode 1, pilot. The Good Place, season 1, episode 1, Everything is Fine. And Mr. Mayor, season 1, episode 1, pilot.
Yeah, so Cheers we've talked about at least 6 times in the past with our 5-part deep dive on Sam and Diane.
Yeah,
Will they, won't
seasons
they?
1 through 5.
We also did the Fear of Flying episode. There might be
Right.
another one in there somewhere. So
Well, and super fun fact. You probably knew this. I just found this on my Ted Danson deep dive. But in the Simpsons Fear of Flying episode, he does the voice of Sam Malone.
Oh, that's funny.
He appears as Sam Malone.
Yeah, I've forgotten that, but that they did stuff like that all the time,
Yeah.
sure. So look, I mean, this, like you mentioned, this is the season 6 premiere. This is a turning point in Cheers. We've gotten rid of Shelley Long. We're bringing in Rebecca, played by Kirstie Alley. And so, in the story, this is sort of like I don't know if you'd call it a cliffhanger or whatever. Sam no longer runs the bar. It starts off with him coming back to find Woody is dressed like a TGI Fridays guy. The whole thing is under new management. They have to wear uniforms. Whole different setup.
Right. So at the end of season 5, Sam sells the bar to a corporation because he and Diane have decided to officially go their separate ways. And we find out in this episode that Diane has not been successful in trying to write her book, so she has gone to Hollywood to become a TV writer. And that gets a big laugh. Woody tells us that. And then Sam walks back into the bar, and we find out from him that his boat, he has sold the bar and he's bought a boat. He's going to sail around the world, go find himself because he has had this toxic relationship for all these years. His boat runs aground in the Caribbean, and he realizes the only place that really feels like home is back at the bar. So he comes back to try to get a job, but the new management run by a corporation, and there's a manager there in the office, and that is Rebecca Howe, and she is played by Kirstie Alley.
Yeah, this is definitely a sort of, a sequel type reset, the sort of like walking back a little bit, like, okay, all that stuff that happened at the end last time, let's kind of get our heads back on straight. We're going to sort of, modify a little bit what happened to Shelley Long, mostly just as a joke, just like, haha, now she's writing for TV or whatever. And yeah, Sam, we just
right, because the big joke was that she left to go pursue her movie career.
Right,
and
which didn't totally work.
I mean, it did. There were. I love Troop Beverly Hills.
Sure.
Like I'll love Troop Beverly Hills forever.
But yeah, it's the sort of like, okay, we all want Sam back. We all want to sort of reset this.
Yeah, and there was never any question at the end of season 5 that Sam was really leaving.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we get, they sort of build it up a little. There's a few scenes talking about the new manager. Carla says the new manager eats live sharks for breakfast. And then when she finally comes in, I'm going to say it looks like Kirstie Alley fashioned her blazer out of Michael Jackson's Thriller leather jacket, that bright red thing,
yeah.
right? There's a very, very striking looking style, like that
Yes.
same exact look, but sort of modified into a woman's blazer. And the character is established really quickly. She's all business. She's very kind of tough and doesn't, Sam is doing the usual flirty stuff and she's not having it. And I guess my thing right off the bat was like, is this dynamic too similar to the Sam and Diane dynamic?
Well, so I was thinking the same thing as we were watching it. And what I sort of came to was they obviously didn't want to make it so different right from the beginning that people who have loved this series for all these years would be turned off by it, right? You're still going to get a little bit of chemistry between these two, but it's going to have a different angle. It's not this like, I am in love with you and I am trying to change you kind of whininess that you were getting and the way they were writing for Diane, right? This, Kirstie Alley's character, Rebecca, is a businesswoman. She's also educated, but she's not like liberal arts, right? Which Diane was in the liberal arts. She's a businesswoman. Like she's an MBA. She is on the fast track to upper management at this corporation. She needs this bar to be successful and, financially or fiscally, responsible and all of that. So she can go and make her next step in her career. So she's just a little bit more matter of fact. But Sam is the same person. Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like there's the differences between Rebecca and Diane are clear. They're exactly the things you said, not to mention they just physically are a little different. But their dynamic is still, especially if you go back to the beginning of Sam and Diane.
Yes, it's very similar to that.
Sam saying things like, oh, hey, can we go somewhere private where we can slip out of our things and say howdy? Right? That's a verbatim line. And then the woman rolling her eyes and going, get out of here. Stop this. Like, stop talking to me like that, And I don't know. I guess this whole thing made me kind of step back and think, because with our deep dives in the past, the whole thing was like, okay, let's try to figure out like, what are these actors' superpowers? What makes them so likable? What makes us want to watch them? I was watching 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford, and it occurred to me because the other movie I like with him is Sneakers. Like what Robert Redford does better than anybody is be on a telephone with somebody shady that he doesn't know who they are and slowly realize that he might be talking to the bad guy and have to keep his cool and say the code word or whatever. And you're watching him make those calculations just in his face, and it's fun and different. Michael J. Fox, you watch him in Back to the Future being so overwhelmed by everything around him. What do you mean, Doc? What are you saying? You built a time machine. And that's the same look in his eyes when he's going, what do you mean you want a woman to be president on Family Ties? Right. These different actors just have these different things that they do. So with Danson, I'm like, what is this guy's thing? And I think part of it is always starting off as the super high status, I think I can charm the pants off of anybody. And then always reaching a point where he goes like, okay, I see that you're a little smarter than the people I'm used to dealing with. I guess I'm going to have to level with you, and kind of breaking down the machismo and the charisma and being a little more sincere, I think. And that's sort of what he's going to have to do with Rebecca here.
Yeah. And that's also, not in that same breaking down of machismo, but all of his characters, all of these sitcom characters that we're going to talk about have that thing of status. The architect of the neighborhood in A Good Place, and the doctor for the neighborhood in Becker, and the mayor in Mr. Mayor. And in all of these situations, there is some sort of character flaw in him that makes it so that he isn't quite up to the job, but he can still kind of get it done because he's personable.
Well, and it almost, it's like he represents to differingly intentional degrees, this thing of he is the kind of person, because he's a tall, handsome white man, he is the kind of person you put in charge, whether or not he deserves it. And yeah, it's funny how Mr. Mayor is all about all these people around him, his underlings, who are intelligent and political, going, Jesus, can you believe that this guy's in charge? And this episode is all about Rebecca and the other bartender who gets totally railroaded. We'll get to him. It's about Rebecca going like, Jesus, they're making me, we haven't explained this part of the story yet, but the higher ups are making me put this guy in charge, or at least give him a significant
put him back behind
position.
The bar.
Yeah. And he's an idiot, and kind of like, the differences with Cheers, we're all supposed to be on his side, and Rebecca represents the square fuddy-duddies that don't get him and don't get the bar. But in every case, it's like, regardless of where they want our loyalties to lie, it's like, yeah, Ted Danson is the tall, handsome white guy that gets to just walk in and smile and say some dumb come on, and everybody loves him.
And then it'll be just fine, right? He makes us all feel safe, even if he's problematic. So he's back, and we get this whole diatribe from Frasier about how much better the bar used to be, and why can't it be like the old days, and man, the bar sucks now. And we meet Wayne, the new bartender, who is like a robot. He knows every drink ever. He's really, good at his job and methodical. And Sam says to him, maybe you'll be able to be a relief bartender. And Wayne goes, I am not a relief bartender.
Yeah, well, Sam is like way out of line here. He just, saunters back into this place he used to work.
He used to own.
Okay, fair enough, but he doesn't anymore. And he says, I'm going to be the bartender now. Hey, you who is like literally working right now. I don't know, maybe you can be the backup if I get sick or something.
Right,
you can't do that.
If I need a day off. So, but he goes in and he has a conversation with Rebecca. She tells him no. And then she says, well, out of pity, I'll let you be a reliever.
Yeah, part-time.
And he's like, all right, I'll take it. And he goes back out and has a conversation with Carla. And Carla lets him know, oh, no, you're not going to be a reliever for long. Operation Get Rid of Wayne is already in process, because she has bet Wayne that he doesn't know every drink. And he's like, I know how to make every drink ever. Yeah. And he's like, all right, you want to bet me? What are the stakes? And she says, well, the stakes are, if you can't make every drink ever, then you quit this job.
Yeah.
Because what has happened is the corporate has called Rebecca.
Yes.
And Rebecca has been told, like you were saying, oh, Sam, the famous Red Sox pitcher, wants to come back and work at this bar. It's a running
joke. Rebecca doesn't know who he is.
Right. He wants to come back and work at this bar. You need to fire somebody and make space for him. So Rebecca's going to fire Woody.
Yeah.
Because he's not
he's an idiot.
Very good at his job. And so Carla is trying to stop that from happening. Now, meanwhile, none of our normal cast of characters, no Norm,
the customers, Norm and Cliff aren't there. Norm came in briefly, but nobody yelled Norm.
So
and he
turned
goes
around.
Yeah, he says the new crowd is a bunch of squares or something.
Yeah, so he turns around and leaves, and there's white tablecloths on the tables.
Yeah.
And they're, like you said, they're wearing these uniforms.
Yeah,
Carla's
little vests and stuff.
Yeah, Carla's in this like green dress, jumper dress.
One step away from having to wear flair like in Office.
Yes, I mean, she looks like a candy striper, only in green.
Yeah,
I mean,
she matches Woody, because Ted Danson makes the joke, you guys ought to call each other in the morning and straighten this out.
Exactly, because they're in their uniforms. So none of the regular cast are around. We had Frasier at the beginning, but he's just kind of there in and out of scenes, like you were talking about before with the living set. But yeah, so none of them are there. So Carla is like, says to Wayne, I know today someone's going to walk into this place and order a drink you've never heard of. And then in walks Norm. Somebody remembers from earlier when Woody was trying to teach him to say Norm, and says it. And Norm's like, not now. So that's how we know, all right, this is one of Carla's plants. And then Cliff comes in and Frasier comes in.
Yeah.
And one of the other guys that was like part of the living set that doesn't really have a name comes in, and they order this drink.
Yeah, the Screaming Viking.
That's
Norm
right.
comes in, orders the Screaming Viking. It's very funny the way it's all coordinated because, this bartender Wayne is like, that doesn't exist. That's not a real drink. And then Woody comes up and goes, oh, I know what a Screaming Viking is. Do you want your cucumber lightly bruised? And Norm is like, oh, yes, of course. Like, they've all corroborated. They all know the little ins and outs of the Screaming Viking.
Right. And meanwhile, Sam is just sitting at a table with his feet up watching all this happen because he didn't coordinate this at all. Like, this was all Carla's idea. Wayne has gone in on the bet and said he'll quit his job if he doesn't know every drink ever. And if he wins, then the other side of the bet is he gets Sam's sailboat, which we know is run aground in the Caribbean and no good anymore. And so Rebecca's watching all of this unfold. Sam's sitting at a table with his feet up, just grinning because all of his old friends have, made it happen so he can come back, even though this was already in place long before he showed up. And so all is good. And of course, Wayne loses the bet and he gets so mad, he storms out because he's like, this is fake. There's no such drink.
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
Now, I have to say, Wayne is the Cheers character I relate to the most in the history of this show. I was always the person that would show up to work, do my job, not necessarily be friends with everybody. He does nothing wrong the entire time. He was
he's just
hired
sort
to
of
do
pompous.
a job.
You're not pompous.
No, but if somebody declared, you don't know how to make drinks, and I did, I would say, no, I know what I'm doing. They're just, and again, if somebody strolled in and said, I used to own this place, get out of here, I have your job now, I'd say, burn in hell, you don't have my job. Yeah, totally railroaded, gaslit, and so he has to take a hike, and there's a funny sort of end to the bit where they're also trying to fool Rebecca into thinking this Viking drink exists. So when she goes into the back office, like, all right, I guess I'm going to have to make this phone call or whatever. I'm going to have to hire Sam. And everyone in the bar has the Viking drink in their mouth. She pops her head back out just to see. And they're like, tastes good. We're still drinking it. And then they all spit it out when she goes back in the second time.
Yes.
My last note on this episode, and I know he sort of diffuses this a little bit, but Sam asks Rebecca to smile after giving him the job.
It's so obnoxious.
Ick in capital letters.
It's so obnoxious.
Yeah, earlier he says something about, because the way this ends is that the tables are turned, basically. Sam has eavesdropped on the phone call. He knows that Rebecca's bosses have asked her to hire him. So now he's playing it all like, oh, you've decided to give me a job? Well, maybe I don't want a job or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he says to her, well, maybe if you throw in all the usual benefits, medical, dental, horizontal, at this point, it's worthless. It's silly to even point out that you can't say things like that to people. And then, at the end, when he goes like, all right, just one more thing, give me a smile. I'm just like, stop. And then they undermine the moment because he's like, every woman has a beautiful smile or something. And then she does. And he goes, I guess I was wrong or whatever. And it's actually at the point where him insulting her makes it less cringy. I'm like, okay, that actually brings it a little bit back to something I'm more comfortable with than just asking her to smile before you leave.
Yeah, no, the whole thing was yuck there at the end. Well, so Sam follows Rebecca into the office because she's like, we need to have a conversation. And she says, you've got me over a barrel here. You know that the bosses, because he spills, accidentally lets slip that he has heard this conversation. And she's like, look, I know I have to hire you, but what you just did out there completely undermined me, and that will never happen again. And so that's kind of where they leave it. And then as he's walking out the door, he is like, all right, you're right. I shouldn't have done it, whatever. He's taking the blame for Carla, which is like the way of making it look like he's a good guy because he's taking the blame for Carla's actions. But then he does the whole smile thing. And then she eventually smiles, but sort of half smiles. And then he calls her ugly for the smile. And I was just like, ugh. I too was like, this whole thing is ick. And this is the beginning of a totally, not totally, but like a different Sam. So going forward, the original idea behind Cheers was to have this Hepburn Tracy sort of chemistry and relationship between their two characters. And now we have a different two characters. And the only reason Cheers lasted as long as it did is because Diane moved away and that relationship ended. And this new dynamic where Sam is like gonna try for a little while to continue to be his old self and just realize that that's never gonna work, and Rebecca isn't Diane. Like, I think there's even an episode, a few episodes into the 6th season, where someone says to him, like, that's not Diane, you can't act that way.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because he then, as this time goes on, Sam, the character, gets to become more of like the straight man with all these wacky characters around him. And that is Ted Danson's sweet spot.
Yes, well, that's what's going to happen in the second half of his career, which we'll talk about. But yeah, absolutely. And you can see that all the way through, that's part of what makes Cheers fun, is that certain episodes are going to be about Woody or Coach or Frasier. And then, yes, Sam can just be the cool guy behind the bar that is a foil to them. When we focus on him, I think he's a little bit of the grown-up version, or at least this is what we're going for, or what they're going for, the grown-up version of what we always say about Michael J. Fox, where it's like he's got just such an underlying decency and charm that he can be a cad, he can be obnoxious or whatever, and just the same way Michael J. Fox can go like, but Mom, women belong in the kitchen, and we go like, oh, you know, I think that's how we're supposed to feel about Ted Danson, and it generally works, because like we said, they always pair him with these very formidable women that can sort of like, oh, sure, that'll work with the, you know, extra floozy girl that we see for 2 seconds, but then Rebecca or Diane or whomever is going to get him to open up a little bit and respect them and whatever. But so it's never like, he's never doing the stuff that's totally idiotic like Tim the Toolman Taylor, where then he has to fully come to terms with it. It's more like his attitude, like he's a little obnoxious, a little sexist or aggressive, and so he gets a little bit of a comeuppance for that, and so he has to process that a little bit and shape, but you know, it's more subtle because it's not a family show. There's no kids or anything. So it's more like we learn lessons, but they're little changes in course. They're not like, oh, now I know to never tell a lie or something.
Right.
You know?
It's not that kind of show.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's continue the Danson train into Becker.
Season 1, Episode 1, Pilot.
Okay, so here's the thing. I disliked this show so strongly that I think it may lead to a change that I'm going to propose in the way that we do our podcast.
Wow.
Kind of like when a kid falls off a ravine or something and then they have to change the laws in that state. So how many seasons did this show go for?
6.
Okay. So just to catch up, in case anyone's new to our podcast, what we normally do is story tropes, right? Where we say this episode is going to be about a lady giving birth in an elevator, and we find particular episodes throughout the years of different sitcoms that did that, and then we talk about them.
Yes.
And then sometimes we focus on tropes of the shows themselves, like TV shows about aliens or shows starring Ted Danson, in which case we usually do the pilot episode of each series.
Right, which I've said for a long time is a bad idea.
Yes. Then
you finally agree with me?
Yes.
Thank you.
We often end up then, always having to make this excuse that, well, this one was kind of rough, but, you know, it's the pilot. It always takes them a while to get their footing, which we always understand. But there's also a sense of like, well, I don't know, you got to start somewhere. We're talking about the show as a whole. At this point, I'm ready to say this show was so unpleasant to me that I think going forward, if we're doing this kind of trope and we're talking about a show that was a long-running thing, we should do, if you know, we have no other inclinations, we should do the first episode of the median season.
Okay.
Right? Or maybe just default to the third season, because that often is considered, Simpsons, The Office, even Breaking Bad. A lot of times, start with season 3, you're in good shape.
All right.
And if we're talking about a show that got better after the first 6 episodes, then why are we torturing ourselves
And watching
by watching
episode
this?
1? Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, Becker, what do you do when you've been on a sitcom for, 12 years, 11 years, and your character is so known backwards and forwards that you don't even know what to do next, right? Well, you do something that is completely the opposite. As charming and easygoing and funny as Sam is, this guy, Becker, he's a doctor in the Bronx, Harvard grad, and works, for pittance, helping the poor in the Bronx, right?
So annoying.
And he is the crankiest misanthrope that you ever heard of. He has the diner that he goes into for breakfast every morning clears out when they know he's coming. They hear him coming down the street and someone yells in at a la Devil Wears Prada, he's coming.
Yeah.
And the whole place clears out because they know he's going to come in and ruin everyone's day by just pontificating negativity, on negativity for 20 minutes while he's there.
Yeah, he's horrible. But before we even get there, I was turned off immediately by the video
by the
toaster
real world
filter. Yeah.
Open.
Yeah. On the theme sequence, they have, that thing that they love to use in the 90s that just crunches down the colors to 10 colors. So it makes these sort of bands of color. You've seen it in any crappy music video.
It reminds me of the real world. There was definitely a season or 2 of the real world.
Yeah. Where they would do little cutaways for a few seconds that.
In their open, their title sequence. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it just very dated, very annoying, adds nothing. And then, I have to say, just going into this, I had never seen this. To me, Becker is almost a punchline as a show that's not necessarily bad, but just kind of random. One of those things remember Becker? Remember how that show was on for years,
Well, so it followed Ray Romano. It followed Everybody Loves Raymond, and that boosted its ratings. And then they moved it to a Sunday night slot, and it tanked. And then they were going to cancel it. And then they brought it back as a mid-season replacement, or it was supposed to be at the end, a mid-season replacement to follow King of Queens. But they decided, no, we'll do it from the beginning of the season. But it was still following King of Queens. So it benefited from these awful sitcoms that were so popular in the early 2000s that benefited from that.
Well, yeah. And again, Ted Danson is sitcom royalty at this point. So it is a little bit in the early 2000s, if an Adam Sandler movie comes out, even if it's not his best movie, it's still a little bit of a big deal.
Yeah, you go see, what was it called? Big Daddy or whatever?
Yeah. I think what he's going for here, I think Archie Bunker is kind of the model, maybe this idea of there's also, remember Andy Rooney, who was on TV at this time. There's a thing of we like grumps, we like people who are lovable curmudgeons.
Yeah, we like a misanthrope.
Yeah. And so, he's kind of hey, come on, the word for Archie Bunker. But, it's the people that they surround him with, he has no equal on the show. He has all subordinates, people who are, service people who have to wait on him. There's nobody who is in their character his equal or in their status in society. Everyone just sort of has to put up with him.
Right.
And
because of who he is.
Yeah. And what's going to frustrate me more and more as the show goes on is the attempts the things that are good about him, in my opinion, are 10 times more obnoxious and trite than the things that are bad about him.
Right.
Going into this, if you asked me what Becker was even about, guess number 1 would have been a detective Guess number 2 would have been like a lawyer, like was T.J. Hooker a lawyer, or is it like a lawyer detective?
I don't
something?
know. That you don't even over my skis.
A show with like a guy's last name as the title. Like he's probably a detective. It's like Columbo or Matlock or something. They're always lawyers that are kind of like detectives, or detectives that are kind of like lawyers.
Monk.
Yeah, so that's what I figured this would be. But no, he's a doctor. The studio audience, quote unquote, because this sounds as real as the studio audience in the Jetsons, they laugh at lines like, bite me, or just like when he lies, like he'll get into work. He works at a hospital or a doctor's clinic, and someone will say, you smell like cigarette smoke. And he'll go, I wasn't smoking, the guy at the diner was. And the audience laughs. Like, what that, like, this is like those Nickelodeon shows where they, where they have the laugh track for nothing.
Or just like those 90s shows where like mean stuff and lying got laughs.
Yeah,
like,
but again, this is like Friends is on the air at this point,
no,
right?
it's
Seinfeld
true.
is on the air at this point.
Very
like,
true.
There were shows that were doing better stuff than this.
100%.
Ray Romano was doing better stuff.
No, he
than
wasn't.
this.
So we have Becker is a doctor, not a lawyer or a detective, but we don't figure that out until the end of the diner scene when he takes out his stethoscope and puts it on, and the people in the diner, who we've now found out, Reggie, who owns and runs the diner, is the daughter of the guy who was Becker's friend that used to own and run the diner, and he's died, and so Reggie's taken over. You've got Jake,
same as Happy's Place, right?
Yep,
We
yep.
love that
You've got
chestnut.
Jake, who is blind, and he works at the newsstand that's in the diner, in the front part of the diner, and
very familiar actor.
Yes,
I couldn't place
he's been
him.
in a million
He's usually
things.
got dreadlocks around this time. I feel like I
Yes.
know him from a movie where he's got dreadlocks.
Yes, you'll recognize him from so many things. He was on Blossom, and he had dreads when he was on Blossom, and yeah, I'm trying to remember. Oh, he was in Swingers, the movie
Yes.
Swingers. He was in High Fidelity.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's Jake, and he works at the newsstand, and then Becker goes to work, and we've got Margaret, who is his nurse and office assistant, and you have Linda, played by Shawnee Smith.
Shawnee Smith.
What do we
from
know her from?
Saw 2, 3, 4, and 10, I believe.
I don't know if that's what I know her from, but okay. Anyway,
Yeah, she's playing a space cadet type character,
She is.
kind of like the Ab Fab Lady's assistant.
Yes. She's a new nurse assistant, and she is, and so it's like her first day on the job. And so that's the cast of characters that surrounds him. We'll get, over the course of the series, we'll get a little bit of a will they, won't they with Reggie. Like, he's the girl who runs the...
Oh, yeah. The friend at the diner even, like, says something like that, ooh, she likes you, and like,
Yeah.
Besides the I
fact
think,
that
pretty
she's-
vast age difference, I
she
think.
looks too young for
It's
him.
also just like, yeah, nobody likes this guy. Like, you can't act like this and like
And also
have people
like him.
be attracted
well,
to
but
you.
so that's the thing. We find out through the course of this episode that there's a reason everybody like sticks by this guy, even though he's a total grump and he's like a total Oscar the Grouch. But he actually has a heart of gold. We find out he's treating like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old child who has HIV and got it from a blood transfusion. And it's not looking good.
Yes.
And he's like coming down, and then they can't get him into a program. And so eventually they get him into a program, and it turns out that Becker's going to pay for it.
Yeah, before we even get to the T-cell kid, because this is what really grinds my gears about this show. It's just this whole, like you said, the heart of gold thing. I think House did this much better. The idea of the grumpy doctor who's super smart and
Right.
he's lacking in social skills.
Speaking of a detective,
but
they
yeah, but he'll save your life because he'll figure it out. Like, this is going for a very similar vibe. Before we get the
without
little
all the
kid,
drama, though.
Yeah, and before the specificity of the medical stuff, not that that was like totally accurate either. But he walks in and there's a morbidly obese man waiting for him.
Right.
And this is your first taste of like, oh, I see, Becker's got a different kind of style, but he just might be up to something. Because he walks in, starts mouthing off to the guy, oh, you're a big fatso or whatever.
He's like, that diet I put you on, it wasn't just for you to read the paper.
Yeah, but the whole thing, like this takeaway from this scene where he's doing all these like sitcom-y insults to this big fat guy, you're also supposed to get the sense of like he's actually getting through to him. He's talking to him about like, oh, if you love your wife and your kids or even yourself, it's like he's telling it like it is. He's a straight shooter. And even though he's being kind of mean about it, he's kind of cutting through this guy's resistance. And we, the audience, are supposed to understand like, oh, like in his own weird way, Becker just saved that guy's life, and then we get...
I don't know if it's all that.
I think it is. I really think you're supposed to get like, oh, this is funny, but he's actually,
helping.
in an unorthodox way, he's doing a good job as a doctor.
Yeah.
And then we get the scene with the kid where they're talking about the T cells, and he's going, remember what I taught you about the cells and how they work? You've got good cells and bad cells and stuff. And his relationship with the kid is supposed to be very touching.
Yes.
And here's the thing. If they just stopped at like, oh, he's got a good rapport with this kid, like obviously a cliche, tale as old as time, but that would have been fine. It's a sitcom. It doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. The idea that he's got something good going with this kid, even though he's a dick to all the parents, that's fine. Throughout the show, they keep doling out more and more details. He calls his ex-wife's ex-husband before him, another doctor, starts asking about this experimental treatment at Mount Sinai or Sloan Kettering or whatever. And they keep doling out like, oh, not only is he arranged for this experimental treatment, he's secretly paying for it. And then we get shots of his receptionist or whatever after she's asked him like, but wait, you routed the check to go to your bank instead of the hospital fund or whatever? And then after he leaves, she like beams at him with admiration. Like, it's just so like
laying it on
heavy-handed. Yeah, just like, get it, everybody? He's really, really nice. He's spending his own personal money for this little kid. And it's just like, dude, like, stop spending so much time trying to convince us that he's secretly nice and come up with one funny joke. How about that?
Come up with one funny joke. So all of that, it happens in the episode just in the way Jay described. None of it was heartwarming. All of it was annoying. It was, you're not wrong that it was heavy-handed. And it was particularly heavy-handed in episode 1, right? Because you don't know these people yet. Like, it would be one thing if over a period of time, in little dribs and drabs, you realize that, oh, Oscar the Grouch has a heart of gold, right?
Yeah.
But instead, it's a sitcom and it's 1998. So we have to tell you everything you need to know right up front so you'll come back and watch it the next week.
We figure it out when the mom says, oh, we don't have money for fancy experimental treatments. He goes, don't worry about that. We'll figure something out. You get, oh, okay, he's gonna pay for it. He's gonna make it happen. We don't need to have 4 more scenes where somebody is like,
just in case people weren't as smart as you to drive home.
There must be some mistake. This says that you paid for the operation.
I need you to understand, the people that are watching this show just watched Ray Romano. They need it spelled out for them this way.
I do have in my notes that I love his cardigan. I'll put that in the plus side.
So, fun trivia about this show. Later on in the series, the sort of will they, won't they with Reggie and everything kind of comes to a head, and they bring in this other character played by Nancy Travis, who was his girlfriend.
Mother of the titular baby and little lady.
Exactly. From his movie days. And so she comes in, she's much more age appropriate. And then at the end of a season, the girl who plays Reggie was just fired because they liked the chemistry and the like not huge age gap.
Well, that's weird. They
better.
got rid of the love interest of Ted Danson halfway through the show because they got tired of her, huh?
No, come on. Diane chose to leave, or, Shelley Long chose to leave. So anyway, that was something that happened. And then the last couple seasons, you had Nancy Travis instead of Reggie.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I guess I would say the same thing. Like, the idea is we've got this guy, Ted Danson, who's super charismatic and charming. So we can use that for irony. We can give him a character who's not very likable, and that tension will be fun and will win us over. And I'll say from now on, it'll be called the Becker rule. Maybe if we were watching a season, a show from a future season, we would see that. As it is, I'm watching this going, it's debatable whether Sam Malone tested the limits of a character that Ted Danson could make likable. For me, this is proof positive that Ted Danson does not have the charm to make this Becker character likable. Again, the through line in terms of tracking the career trajectory is clear to me. Like you said, they wanted a different kind of character, one who's not trying to charm the pants off of you, literally. But,
one who's nice, but undercover nice.
Yeah, but it's that same through line of we're going to trust the charm and the good looks and everything else, the Ted Danson package, to make this fun.
Yeah, and I think you're onto something here, because the next show that we're going to watch is The Good Place. And spoilers, he plays Michael, a demon, in The Good Place. And he has all of the badness that you're talking about that's hidden underneath the nice surface. So he flips what he was doing in Becker, where all the grouchiness and all the meanness is hiding like a good person. Now we're going to flip it the other way around, and you've got him being very avuncular, and he's truly a demon. And so the little flare-ups of evil and the little twinkle we see in his eye when he says nice things that sort of are like, God, he's so nice, it's almost mean. Mm-hmm. You get to see that. And I think that's where he found his stride, right? That's more the right way to play this two-sided coin that he's trying to play here.
What you just said was a true spoiler for me, and I am processing that.
You son of a bitch, how many times do I have to tell you to watch this show with me?
All right. On that note, let's move on to The Good Place.
Everything is Fine, Season 1, Episode 1.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I think both of us, when we watched this last night, more so than anything we've watched for the podcast, and you're a big fan of this show, me less so.
Because you suck and you should watch it.
We'll get into it, but we both had this sense of oh God, this again, because I have seen this first episode of The Good Place at least twice before. You said this is the fifth or sixth time I've watched this.
Yeah, I've watched the series all the way through twice. Mm-hmm. And then I think I've started it twice with you, and we just keep falling off of it. And it is so frustrating to me, because this is the type of show that you love. This is the type of show that you're obsessed with and know all the intricate details of it and tell me about. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't even know that was that. There is so much inceptioning in this show. It is so funny. It is so well done. It's so good. And it blows my mind that you just said Michael as a demon is a spoiler, when the last time we watched this, we were in episode 4. And spoiler alert for everyone out there, the end of season 1 twist that only Ted Danson and Kristen Bell knew through the entirety of season 1. All the rest of the cast was kept in the dark. They were the only two that knew. That end of season 1 twist, Jay figured out episode 4. He's like, oh, I get it. This is the bad place. Ha, ha, ha.
All right. So, yeah, we must have been watching that at night for fun, and I truly have no recollection of that transpiring. What I do remember is, I had basically the same exact experience with this show twice. When it first came around, I watched the first 3, 4, 5 episodes. And then, just like many things, I never made a conscious decision to stop watching it. I just kind of found myself motivated to other things and drawn away. And then you and I started watching it at some point because you liked it a lot.
And I know it's a show you'll love. You literally have Nietzsche and Kant and all of the philosophers they talk about on this show on your bookshelf.
Yes, and I'll maintain to this day, like, I'll never say no, I don't want to watch that, but I will never suggest watching it. Because here's the thing, I can say, you know, this isn't totally a Becker's rule thing because, like I said, I've seen a handful of episodes, and also because this is a little bit of a different kind of show where they kind of knew what they're doing from the start. This is certainly not bad, but for various reasons that I'll try to articulate, this is not for me. I don't connect with this show.
You just need to get through season 1. It's like Schitt's Creek. If you can get through season 1, all of a sudden, all of the things that are horrible and annoying in season 2 become endearing and lovely.
Yeah, that was not at all my experience with Schitt's Creek.
Oh, that was definitely my experience with Schitt's Creek.
I agree that got better, but I liked it from the start. I did not need to get through any of that. To me, those characters were appealing from the start. And more specifically, if you want to start with there as a comparison, Schitt's Creek is a low concept show. And that's where I'm going to start. There's a few things about this that I think make it just not totally vibe for me. And one of them is that for me, I think this concept, a couple things. I've seen a lot of stuff in my day about funny or interesting takes on the afterlife. Right? From Beetlejuice, defending your life.
Defending your life. This is
Bill and
so,
Ted's
it's so
Bogus
good,
Journey.
like defending your life.
I just feel like by my 12th birthday, I had seen like 37 movies that were like, here's our version of what the afterlife is. And there's always things like, oh, we don't say God, we say the big guy or something. You know, we like always coy little references
There's no
and
deity
stuff.
in this.
But it's the same thing. The whole concept of the good place is that kind of thing. Stay Tuned with John Ritter, where Jeffrey Jones is like the devil, except he's a TV executive or whatever. Back-to-back Pixar movies, Coco and Soul, about their like impressionistic take.
That came after The Good Place.
On what the afterlife is. Yeah, but so I'm just saying that premise in and of itself is something that I'm torn about, because on the one hand, it's really cool.
Sure.
And that's the kind of thing.
And you're not wrong. This is a high concept show.
Yeah, but I'm saying the specific concept is something that, like, in creative writing class in 5th grade, I was going like, oh, let me make my version of like what the heaven and hell is, and what instead of St. Peter, we'll have a guy who wears a suit and, all that kind of stuff. And so when stuff like that comes around, and it always will, Good Omens on Amazon,
which is great.
We're always going to have stuff like that.
Except for Neil Gaiman is horrible.
I roll my eyes at it a little bit of like, okay, another one of these. Like, you better have something really good.
And they do!
So apart from the premise itself, I don't think, for me, this is a good match for the 26 half-hour episodes per year format. And I think this goes back to what we talked about with How I Met Your Mother, how towards the end of that, the 2010s, whatever time this was, TV was really getting to a place where even a network sitcom, especially someone like Mike Schur, who gets his big break on The Office, then does Parks and Rec, like, we don't want to do another thing where it's like, oh, now they're in a diner, and they want to do interesting, challenging stuff. But to me, like, that's not really what I'm into for sitcoms.
But also, this one was one of those ones that, like, it came out in 2016. It is right there. It was doing parallel network television and streaming, right? It was happening at the exact same time. It isn't a 26 episode season. They're 13 episode seasons.
Okay, fair enough.
And they have an ending in mind from the beginning. They always were going to do 4 seasons and tell the story and be done. Like, it's different in so many ways to what you're putting on it by saying this is a 26 episode network sitcom TV show.
Look,
it's not.
The fact remains that I had the same experience both times, which is by the end of the 4th or 5th episode, I'm not like, this is bad and I don't like it.
No, it's so good. good.
I start to lose patience. I start to go with like, I've been watching this now for longer than the length of a movie. And I'm just like, I'm losing patience. I'm losing patience with the getting to know the characters and stuff. And if this were a movie or a little bit tighter of like even just like 8 episodes or something, maybe it would play differently for me. That's one thing. Another thing is...
That's not one thing. That's been like 6 things. We haven't even started talking about the show yet.
No,
You're still kvetching. You're Becker.
No, look, I'm kvetching because Danson isn't as big a part of this. I don't know if we necessarily need to go with a fine-tooth comb the plot of the show per se. I think we could talk about it more generally and more in terms of Danson, but I just want to say just a couple other things that I butt up against, because I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. This is good. Like, these actors are good. Mike Schur is a good writer and showrunner, but I don't really like it. And part of it is, like I said, that the way it's sort of drawn out, here it comes, the mise en scène, right? This is a show about the afterlife. It's about this high concept sort of supernatural stuff. And what they've chosen to do with it, and I respect this choice, is it's got this very clean, pleasant 2010s digital look. You know, you picture that font, The Good Place, on that nice, clean green screen, and everything looks nice and clean.
It is to make you calm.
Yeah.
So that you understand that you're in the good place.
It's the sitcom version of the Apple Store or Barnes & Noble.
But it's all like, you got to know that it's meta. Like, they're doing it to you on purpose because that's what they're doing to the characters in the show, because they're really in the bad place.
It's an intentional thing, but that was another one of those things that after having experienced several hours of it, starting to go like, all right, this is wearing me down a little bit. Like, this isn't that interesting to me. This just super clean, polished, sort of like Netflixy look to it. And then,
if it was darker, had they gone to like a Severance kind of angle and did it darker and called it a thriller, I think this same idea you would be all behind. But because they're doing it in this very like Apple Store clean and bright way, this is not your aesthetic.
Yeah, well, it's not that it would have to be a thriller per se. I mean, that would just be a whole different thing. But you mentioned Severance, like it doesn't have to be dark or serious like Severance, but Severance does have a very clear look and vibe, and they're doing this retro thing, and it certainly doesn't have to be that.
And you're seeing like Severance from the beginning, because it's a thriller, like you're able to see more of the bad, like more of the bad is shining through, whereas in this one it is literally a twist at the end of season 1, and it just blows my mind. Like, tell me your familiarity with the trolley problem.
Is that one of those like ethical things that's like, I forget which one that is, but it's like you have to choose
3
between
people on the track and 1 person on the other track, and if you switch tracks, you're still going to kill 1 person.
Yeah.
But it turns out that the 3 people are your family members or something, and so like, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know, kind of a thing. Something like that. There's an entire arc in season 2. There's an episode called The Trolley Problem. There's a character who is an ethicist, right?
You know,
like, all of these things get dealt with, and it's all like, you can sit here and explain to me the trolley problem because you're into this stuff. Like, you would love this show.
But that's a little bit like me saying that, oh, you know, there's a show about a tap dancer.
And
that
I would
means
love
you
it.
would love it. Not necessarily. If it's not your kind of thing, you might not like it just because it's about that thing. I will say that long
But you
before...
also are a big fan of all of other Schur's work, right?
Yes. But again, that's going back to the first thing, that at the end of the day, if I'm going to be tuning into this thing like again and again for years, I do prefer, the reason why I like sitcoms is, give me your office full of municipal workers with Nick Offerman as the grumpy guy and Aziz Ansari as the excitable guy. And like, that's a little bit more my speed, this mismatch. And again, I understand that Mike Schur didn't want to keep doing that. But for me as the consumer, this thing that was happening in the 2010s of like, we want to bring all of the creativity and all of the challenging formal stuff that's that's going on in movies and cable TV. We want to bring that to the network sitcom.
Right.
I respect it, but it's just not really my vibe.
Okay.
And so,
you know what? We're just going to let this lie and we're going to talk about the show because you have just gone down into a rabbit hole of wrongness and I can't pull you out. I'm just going to stand up here at the surface and let's talk to our listeners. Let's talk to our podcast friends out there in the world.
my final thing
Oh,
will
Jesus,
get us...
you have more?
It's going to get us into the story of the show. Okay, this is a nice segue into the actual content because the last thing that I feel like stops me from connecting about this, the main character is Kristen Bell, right? She plays Eleanor. This is her story. It's from her point of view. The beginning of the show is her having this meeting with Michael, played by Ted Danson, where he explains, you're in the good place. This is the afterlife. You're one of the few people that get to come here. You have died. He explains the whole comical way that she died. And then what we come to learn is that she's not actually a good person. There's been a mix-up, and she's really a super shitty person who's like comically shitty and vain and selfish and obnoxious. And her soulmate, quote unquote, that she's been paired up with is this character Cheedy, who is an actual like comically good person, you know, speaks 7 languages, philanthropist, etc. So you probably see where I'm going with this. Like,
except for you're wrong because that's not who he is. But you don't know because you won't watch past the 4th fucking episode.
Well, yeah, you're right. You're right. If you're telling me that no, that's a secret twist that he's not like that later on, fair enough. I didn't bail out of this thing after 15 minutes. All right, I've watched the first, like we keep saying, 4 or 5 episodes, and this thing of like, oh, your main character that you're supposed to, you know, that you have no choice but to get behind is this super shitty person.
Didn't you watch Breaking Bad?
I would say that is a much, much different situation.
No, I'm just saying there's an awful lot of gray characters out there that are held up as heroes, and I have a hard time with them, where this is just comedy, right? This is just funny.
And that's the thing that I like, it wears me out, honestly. Like watching this episode again, that was the hearing like line after line of like, oh, well, but can't we just like let everybody else die and save ourselves? And I'm like, you know, that this is funny, but it's not that funny. And this whole thing of like, I'm so selfish, like, all right, okay. Again, like just comparing this to the first episode of a Parks and Rec or The Office or something where we're so charmed by the characters and we're so into it. This isn't going for that. It's a different thing. But it's like, what I'm saying is nobody's real. It's like she's comically shitty. And then we meet this guy and he's comically virtuous. And it's like everybody has these over the top things.
Yes.
And I'm like, all right, I have to give it more and more of a chance. And that's what I'm saying, that it tries my patience, that there's nobody that I can really relate to. And that's why I say again, you know, 2-hour movie, like that might be okay. This thing that I'm supposed to keep coming back to again and again.
Right, but the thing that brings you back is how funny it is. And the thing that brings you back is that there's good jokes, right? You were sitting there talking about Becker, like, how about just write one funny joke? You've got them in spades in this episode, right? There's lots to laugh at. There's lots of good sight gags and fun things and realizations when everybody comes out dressed in Michigan pajamas because she supposedly, like the Eleanor Shellstrop that she's been swapped with, supposedly went to Michigan. Like, there's so much good in there.
We get and I will say, you know, it's a show in the 2010s, so we're getting the little flashback scenes, the little quickie interstitials. The part where she...
the flashbacks to their life, or Eleanor's life on Earth. And right now, we're not getting any flashbacks to anybody else's life on Earth because we don't know who anybody else is. But soon enough, you'll get them.
It's very funny when she... the kid with the clipboards, and I lived in the city. I hate the clipboard kids, the do-gooders that want you to give money. He goes, do you have a second to talk about the whales or whatever? She goes, do you have a second to eat my farts? And then throws her milkshake on the ground.
Throws her coffee cup on the ground. So in season 4, I think, or maybe it's season 3, when some stuff happens and so many spoilers before we get to here, we get the reverse of this scene. In season 3, they're back on Earth. They're trying to they've been given this opportunity by Maya Rudolph, who plays the judge, to earn their way into the good place by going back and righting wrongs, right? Because all of them are actually in the bad place. All of the humans that you have met are humans that are being tortured for eternity by Michael, even though you think they're all good right now.
Yeah, no, okay. I understand that it's going to change. That doesn't change the experience of watching these episodes.
Which is just wrong. You're just wrong. So we've got, but yeah, so there's this really brilliant like flip where now she's the one with the clipboard and she's trying to do good and trying to help the environment. And they realize in season 3 that no matter what you do, you're never good enough. And that's kind of like season 3. That's the big revelation that like, it doesn't matter how hard you try or what kind of life you lead. No one's getting into the good place. And in fact, no one's gotten into the good place for 500 years. Spoiler. Like, and so that is like, I cannot impress upon you enough. Like we're going to watch this whole show together and you're going to have to do a redemption episode because you are like you're so wrongity wrong that I can't even talk to you about it.
Before I met you, this was the show celebrated on the AV Club website I used to go to. Like, I knew that everyone liked the show. And yeah, like I got no reason to not like it. I have tried and failed multiple times to get into it. But anyway, in terms of Ted Danson, what we're really getting in this is Kristen Bell is now the Ted Danson character, right? He's graduated to being this elder statesman, and she's the one who is this very sort of flawed character that the show is going to rely on her charm to sort of anchor the show, right? She's at the center of it.
Except for she's really not a flawed character, right? Like when you watch the whole show and you dive deep, she's just like everybody else. She's kind of an asshole and she's a little bit selfish, which we could all be at times.
Sure.
And he is doing this amazing work where, as an actor, where he is just everything he says has this double meaning and you don't even know it until you know it. And then after that, he has this whole moral conundrum of like, wait a minute, I've over 400 years of reboots watched these humans grow and become better people, even though I was torturing them. And then he has this existential crisis of like, am I torturing them wrong? Is my whole worldview wrong? And then he even like, so he has this big growth where he like turns his whole mind around and, even though he's the architect of this like very first prototype neighborhood where we tell people they're in the good place, but we're actually torturing them for eternity in doing so. Like, how evil is that, right? Like, you're in this perfect, happy place, but it's really, really bad. And so then he goes on this whole journey, but through the first 3 seasons, you never know if what he's telling you is real. And he's playing it in such a way that you could read it both ways at all times, right? Like we talk about the guy who plays Milchick on Severance being just a master at saying horrible things, but doing it with this very pleasant face.
Yeah.
But he's still scary and threatening. Like he's very menacing when he says these things. Ted Danson is not menacing at all. He's saying them in this very nice way. And it's this perfect yin yang to what Milchick does on Severance. I'm just, the more I watch The Good Place, like I said, I've watched it all the way through twice. And every time I go back and rewatch it, I see something new and something brilliant that was in the writing or in the background actors of what they're doing. Because, by the way, everybody in the neighborhood that's not the 5 characters that you have met, they're all demons too, Jay. They're all in on the torture. It's the Truman Show.
I understand that I don't know the full story of the show yet. I think that Ted Danson's casting here, obviously this is a turning point. It may have happened before this, but he's no longer the main guy. And so that changes everything in terms of, what he has to do as an actor and the way he's being used. And it's great. Regardless of what I think of the show as a whole, he doesn't have to be this womanizing asshole anymore. It's a whole different thing. And now, yeah, it's just like you're saying, they're drawing on all the goodwill that we have for him because he's Ted Danson, because he's Sam, he's Becker, he's, Whoopi Goldberg's guy from Made in America. And so you could call it stunt casting if you want to be cynical. He's bringing all of that stuff to this role. So when you sit down at the first scene and you're across the desk from Ted Danson, and now he's got the nice white hair and he's smiling and he's wearing his nice suit or whatever, it's everything you're saying. It's like he just embodies that sense of authority and that sense of benevolence that will then allow the show to play with that and subvert it and everything,
So let's wrap up A Good Place because I can't argue with you about it anymore.
Yeah, the basic shape of the show, right? This story is sort of everything we've said. Like a lot of what we said hasn't even happened yet. It's kind of Eleanor getting acclimated with Chidi. And Michael kind of explaining, he sort of gives this ball at the end, right?
Right. So as part of what we don't know yet is torture, he has convinced Tahani to host a welcome party for everyone who is in the neighborhood. And Eleanor's all upset because Tahani has this big, beautiful house and she's like tall and gorgeous and she calls her a giraffe. And her house, meanwhile, is this tiny little cottage and is decorated with clowns, which are terrifying. And so they go to this party and Eleanor gets wasted and is trying to steal all these shrimp from all the shrimp cocktails. She's stuffing them in her bra. She's already told Chidi, her soulmate, that she wants him to help her be better because she doesn't belong here. And he is sort of dithering over whether or not he's going to do that because he feels like that's a real moral dilemma. And what we'll come to find out about him later is that that's how he wound up in the bad place, is that he can never make a decision and he dithers and dithers and dithers until he dies. And so that's why he's there. And so he's dithering as to whether or not he's going to help her. And in the meanwhile, the neighborhood, again, this is all orchestrated by Michael, but we don't know this yet. The neighborhood is literally ripping itself apart at the seams because something's wrong. Like they talk about it being a finely tuned Swiss watch and something has been thrown into the gears that's now messing it all up. But this is all just a setup so that Eleanor figures out that this is all happening because of her. And then what's she going to do to get out of it? Is she going to say, hey, send me to the bad place? I'm not supposed to be here. Is she going to this? Is she going to that? Meanwhile, Jianyu, the monk who's taken the vow of silence, he also has realized that there's been a mistake, whereas the other characters don't know that there's been a mistake. They are fully in on the idea that they're in the good place and this isn't torture, but both Jianyu and Eleanor figured out basically right away that they were swapped with other people. And so those are not things that we know yet, but when you go back and rewatch it, the show becomes even more brilliant for those reasons.
Yeah, and I will say on the plus side, it was reminding me a lot, the whole sort of vibe of this, when they're establishing the good place and he's explaining about the frozen yogurt shops everywhere.
Oh my gosh, there's 75 frozen yogurt shops. When they reboot the neighborhood in later seasons, they try different things.
Yeah.
And so, and like behind the scenes, because frozen yogurt melts, what they actually eat in all the scenes where they're eating frozen yogurt are dyed mashed potatoes.
That's funny. Douglas Adams is what it reminded me of, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books, that whole thing of like science fiction where it's world building based on humor. It's just like, oh, and let me tell you about that planet where they do their taxes all the time or whatever. It's just like these little observations about why does everyone like frozen yogurt that's then weaved into the, mythology of the show. And again, that stuff is fun. one. Yeah, all right. I feel like we've significantly debated this. Ted Danson, at this point now, he's almost doing like what Chevy Chase did for a while, what John Hamm did. Like, it's funny how handsome I am. And now that I'm older and I've got this like authority to me, like it's just, they can deploy that in different ways. And that's what we're going to see in Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Season 1, Episode 1, pilot.
Yeah, so this was one, much to your annoyance, I kept confusing it with Spin City and thinking that it was from the 90s and that we should be watching it third instead of fourth. This is a relatively recent show. I do remember watching this in real time when it came out.
Yeah, it's a Tina Fey,
yes.
executive produced, created by Tina Fey. You've got Holly Hunter in it. And then, of course, a couple of SNL alum because it's Tina Fey. Bobby Moynihan's in it. And then Bella Lovell, who is, I know her from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. She's hilarious. She shows up as the best friend character in movies and stuff, but she's very, very funny.
She's the main aide.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah. And I'm super excited to see how she develops. But the show only ran for 2 seasons. Yeah.
I was going to say this is an unfortunate case where I wish we could institute the Becker rule. I wish this had lasted long enough to drop in on season 3, episode 1, because this definitely has a little bit of that sort of not quite having found its way, series premiere type thing, but certainly much smoother sailing than Becker. We can say that.
Oh, yeah. This, he's definitely, I think Ted Danson has sort of found his way now as I'm the grandfatherly figure that you put in charge of things. His whole story arc in this is he runs for mayor of Los Angeles when the previous mayor of LA just sort of tried to run away in the middle of his term during coronavirus because of all the crazy things that were happening during
fires. There's reference to the LA fires and to the murder hornets in 2020.
And this show comes out in 2021, right? So it's coming in on the heels of that. And he decides to run for mayor. He's a wealthy businessman that's been retired for a long time.
He physically resembles one of my favorite politicians ever, the New York mayor, Bill de Blasio. We don't have enough time on this podcast
also tall, right?
to get into why everyone
problematic adoration Jay has for
Bill de Blasio is an ineffectual mayor. Think it through. He was actually really good. Ended stop and frisk. Gave pre-K
supported
for all.
Adams as his successor. Great choices.
He didn't support anybody because he was so politically toxic that none of them wanted his endorsement. He only supported him after he was elected. Anyway, Ted Danson kind of looks like Bill de Blasio, but that's probably the only connection there. And
that's
it
funny
takes
you say
place
that
in
because
LA.
I was thinking you kind of look more like Gavin Newsom, who is the current governor.
But Gavin Newsom is more like the salt and peppery guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that shock of white hair.
He's not fully white. He's not. You're right. He's not. But he also is tall, and he's in California, and he's got the California tan.
The real thing here is just like we said. Danson at this point this is the part he was born to play, a dopey politician.
Right. Exactly. And which he's doing, right? So he is a billionaire who ran a very successful company. His wife got cancer.
Shades of Mike Bloomberg, who would be the New York mayor when Tina Fey probably was living and working in New York.
That's very true. Very true. So so his wife gets cancer and he quits to take care of her and she dies. And then he stays retired to take care of his young daughter.
If only he had a doctor with a heart of gold that would personally chauffeur her and pay for the treatments to Sloan Kettering.
I don't think he needed anyone to pay for the treatments. He was a billionaire. So she got the best care that she could. She just didn't make it. So anyway, and then during the pandemic, when they're about to have this special election, he realizes that his daughter thinks of him. He's sitting on a couch in a slanket. Tina Fey loves to have those cutaways where someone's sitting in a slanket. Yeah. And so he's sitting on the couch watching TV, and his daughter's treating him like this invalid old grandpa.
Oh, yeah.
His daughter is like, I'll come back and turn the TV off for you later, Dad.
I'll help you turn the TV off later. I love you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when he realizes, oh my God, she thinks I'm this, invalid old man. I've got to do something. I should run for mayor. Throws his hat into the race for the special election and surprise, surprise, gets elected. We find out that it is one of his aides, the character that I was just telling you about, Lavelle.
She helped him court the youth vote, right? She used her online savvy.
Exactly.
So she's almost shades of AOC.
Yeah, Michaela is her name in the show. And she basically is like, I can't believe I helped this guy get elected. Like, I was just doing this to have, add some political prowess to my resume. Like, I can't believe he actually won. And then Bobby Moynihan plays the communications director who's left over from the last administration.
His name is Jaden. There's a funny talk where someone goes, aren't you a little old for the name Jaden? And he's like, yeah, I'm actually one of the first ever Jadens.
I was the first
Which
Jaden
is,
ever.
again, another Tina Fey thing, just like throwing shade at young people's names.
Yes.
I feel like there's plenty of that on 30 Rock.
And so anyway, so he kind of reminds me of Mike from Veep.
Sure.
Because also like a bumbling communications director that sort of accidentally stumbles into brilliance every now and then, but usually is messing up. That's kind of what happens here. And then Holly Hunter plays a councilwoman who is wanting to take down this mayor. And so we find out midway through the episode that the reason she is coming after him so hard is that she couldn't get enough signatures to qualify to run for the special election. So she now is just trying to like throw stones and take him down. He says at the beginning of the episode, Ted Danson's character says, I'm not naming any deputy mayors. I'm going to do this myself. Buck stops with me. And then he's like, oh, I'll make her a deputy mayor. She can be in charge of all of these things, and that'll make her happy because all she wanted. And she's going to sit here as deputy mayor and try to, wait for me to fail. But that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Veep. The main plot of this episode, the little sort of MacGuffin, if you will, is going to be that Ted Danson has an initiative about straws. He wants to ban straws. Remember, again, 2020, this was all in the news, straw controversy, paper straws or whatever. That gets him in trouble with his daughter because, she's running for class president and she does a ban straw campaign and, the kids think she stole the idea. And then Holly Hunter comes and says, you're discriminating against disabled people they need the bendy straws or whatever.
Need plastic straws,
Didn't the first ever episode of Veep have to do with the political thing about straws?
Utensils. Yes, it was plastic utensils, and instead they were going to make utensils out of like corn or something, and they were at that they were at like a benefit, and they were using the utensils that she was trying to get everybody to use, and they were melting in the coffee when you stirred your coffee.
It's just funny that like you're making a sitcom about politicians. That's always the easy target. All these things, everyone wants to save the world by doing things with straws.
Get rid of plastic somehow, And then in Veep, it was like, oh, now by doing that, you've pissed off big oil, and because who makes plastic? The oil companies. Okay, so then in this one, it's, well, you've pissed off all the liberals because now, and this is what we were talking about before, how like you just can't, you can't be a good liberal these days.
It's not
You're
even
always fucking somebody.
Well, and it's this like subtaxonomy of like, well, you've appeased the environmentalists, but now the like disabled community is upset because.
But then it turns out the environmentalists are also pissed because all of the plastic straw waste was actually keeping the coyote population under control.
Right.
And so now there's going to be a boom in the coyote population. So then he puts Holly Hunter as deputy mayor in charge of birth control for the mini wolf population because calling them coyotes is a bad thing.
Yeah. Another Tina Fey thing for sure is like making fun of the excessive liberalism and the political correctness and stuff. And I think in general, this I will say is not, you think back to like the first episode of 30 Rock was amazing, like super funny. And this doesn't necessarily reach that level, but there's those little Tina Fey witticisms all throughout this, lots of funny little chuckles and stuff. This Holly Hunter characterization, I would say the way she's styled, it's like the stereotype of sort of like a professional lesbian, would you say? This thing of like the long, straight hair.
Well, it's not even that long. It's still sort of like, it's short.
It's
it comes
not even
to her
long
chin.
on her. It's almost like this
Yeah.
is just the stereotype I have in my mind of like long, straight hair with like very little makeup and like the sort of blazer and like sort of business casual kind of look. And so they're dressing her in a way that to me evokes this certain stereotype politically, socially, and whatnot. But then she's also playing it like she has cerebral palsy or something. You know what I'm talking about? She has this weird thing she's doing with her mouth and her
Holly
posture.
Hunter's one of these actors that always talks like she has a cough drop in the back of her mouth. Like that I've noticed since Raising Arizona. She does. Joan Cusack does the same thing. It's like if you were to talk when you were holding a cough drop in the back of your mouth and you were trying not to swallow it.
Yeah.
And so you talk with a lot of your lips sort of move off to the side because your tongue can't do a lot of what you need it to do.
All right.
That is, she always talks like that. So that
Fair
was
enough.
not a surprise to me.
Then I've seen, Holly Hunter is great. I've seen her in lots of movies and stuff. She's doing something. She's dialing up something.
Well, she's got a very Frances McDormand thing happening. That's when I said.
Well, that's part of the styling, I think.
Yeah.
She's wearing makeup to look like she's not wearing makeup, kind of like she's.
No, they definitely have they've let her lean into all the age that she has, and you know what I mean, like
age
where normally normally in Hollywood and everywhere, right? We try to kind of, especially if we're going to be photographed, sort of try to cover some of the wrinkles and not use certain angles and that kind of stuff. And that's all they're definitely going for that look here. That she's this sort of I don't have any vanity. I am all business, kind of, for sure. And that was what I said to you when we started watching. I was like, man, she looks like Frances McDormand. That's crazy.
Well, I would have a hunch that there is a particular person that either she or Tina Fey or both are modeling this after, are kind of like just some not even necessarily a super famous person, but something about, again, like she's holding herself in a way that seems, it's like when Trump makes fun of mentally challenged people, it seems weird. But anyway, let's just take a step back and say, we've sort of established what this show is about. We've got Ted Danson, and presumably going forward, it's going to be Holly Hunter as the two sort of, these are the two biggest names in the cast. Obviously, they're going to be the people in charge. He's comically inept. She is very capable, and, we'll see the hijinks that comes from that. And then we have Bobby Moynihan and these two young aides. So it's like all the pieces are in place. I will say, and again, don't want to be the one-man Statler and Waldorf here. I tuned in for the first episode of this show back in the day, and I did not return. There was something underwhelming about it.
And that's it, right? I think this show, it's one of these shows that if it had been given an opportunity, let's say it was a show that was just like this, that came out in, I don't know, 89, 95, it would have been given an opportunity to grow into itself, and it could have become something interesting. It could have become like a Spin City. It could have become something better than it was, or like a political version of 30 Rock. I think it definitely could have done that. But it was shot during lockdown. It was shot during the pandemic, right? The first season came out in 2021, so it was shot in 2020, and all of the pandemic protocols are what killed the show. The second season only had it had 4 less episodes or something than it normally would have, because they all the people kept testing positive for COVID because they were doing scenes and trying to follow the protocols. But it was shooting in 2021 when we were all still masking. Most people weren't going out, I was back at work, but I'm a teacher. That's why, so I think the show probably would have had a little bit more time to find its way. But as it was, and again, we're in the pilot episode, so we have to make all the, accommodations for that. As it was, it's I think the place that it was going to go where it would have some heart was in the relationship between Ted Danson and his daughter, the daughter Orly, right? And I think maybe it could have gotten there, but have we ever seen Tina Fey write something like that? where it was
like a touching family relationship.
Right, exactly. Like, I mean, always it's the Mean Girls, you know, and it's like a teen drama.
Well, Kimmy Schmidt has heart to it, but it's not quite that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it could have. It had all the right ingredients, but yeah, it just, the pandemic killed it. So.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, Tina Fey, again, I really like 30 Rock and I'm kind of a fan of her in general, but she is an interesting example of the progressive, sort of cutting edge new voices that we all needed to hear of yesteryear are the stodgy old cranks of tomorrow.
You mean like you?
Definitely. But she has a style now that, look, it's not like she's Archie Bunker, but her whole
No, but she's
voice,
close enough to it. Yeah.
Her whole ethic is a little bit, she has these get off my lawn attitudes that, again, like I think are fine, you know, because she earned it.
The reunion episode that we watched of 30 Rock, where it turns out she's actually the asshole, like that's kind of what's coming to bear.
The episode ends with Holly Hunter giving her press conference. She's like, this is how it is. This is our plan. We're going to have these Benji straws. And she goes, we're going to have a web page for this, web page for that. And she's like, if you don't like the straws, or if you don't know what to do without the straws or something, we've got a video that's going to teach you how to put the cup up to your mouth and suck. The address is la.tiltandsuck.org.mouth, you know, again,
which was a great end to the episode. Like that, I laughed out loud at that. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten snarky email responses to me being like, hey, remember today's whatever, do da 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 da. And then I get like 5 email responses being like, can you please send me a step-by-step video of how to do that? And I'm like, I swear to God, I know you know how to put your grades in the fucking grade book.
Yeah. So there's something like we're saying, like it's a little uninspired overall. You get a sense of like, it's kind of hard to picture this as like a really great show that I kept going back to, but there are laughs throughout it. And definitely Bobby Moynihan has a part where they're watching, I think the aides are watching the press conference live on TV, and you see him in the background just silently like put a mint or a piece of gum in his mouth, start choking on it.
No, that was on camera.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
He's standing like behind
Ted Danson, like
so
the
you're seeing
kid
him
making
on the video
faces.
Feed. Yeah. He puts something in his mouth, starts choking on it, like gives himself the Heimlich.
He's like, he takes his binder,
flag.
He takes his binder, shoves his binder into his diaphragm to like give himself the Heimlich, like throws up the cough drop into the LA flag.
Yes,
and then like uses it to wipe his mouth.
Yeah, and then puts it back into his mouth.
Another Jolly Rancher back in his mouth.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely funny stuff in this throughout, but it is more like, hey, now it's 2020 and like, you know, Tina Fey sitcom with Ted Danson and Holly Hunter, like it's not necessarily enough to just have like a few laughs. Like it's still overall kind of made me go like, well, I'm not like, give me my 25 minutes back, but
but also, again, I think if it had not been 2021 and people, I think the show probably would have lasted a little bit longer.
Yeah.
It has enough legs that it could have gone on a little longer and it could have found a more, right now it's really broad, right? It doesn't, it's just sort of, it's got broad jokes. It's very wide. It doesn't really have a point yet, you know? And I think it probably would have found itself because Tina Fey is going to find herself, right? Like she's brilliant. And so I think it probably would have, but you know, it's another one of those, the casualties.
Yeah.
Casualties of the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, so look, going back over these, you know, starting with 3 Men and a Baby, my first exposure to him, if you think of those 3 guys, right? Steve Guttenberg, Tom Selleck, and Ted Danson, right?
Yep.
I think in a nutshell, they were supposed to be cute, smart, sexy. You know, that was Ted Danson's role in that movie. He was
smart?
the hot one. No, Tom Selleck
was smart.
I think so. I think Tom Selleck was sort of like, he's the one that you spend the most time with, I think. And he's supposed to be the one that like, he gets the most scenes of trying to take care of the baby. I think he's ostensibly the main character.
Yeah.
And he's supposed to be the one sort of figuring out the situation and deal with it. Gutenberg is just a puppy dog. He's super sweet and lovable. And and Danson is supposed to be the charmer. I think
guy.
he's meant to be the actual biological father of the kid.
And he's like an architect, and he's kind of like a man about town.
Was the architect, but he's definitely a man about town. Danson is the hot one. And I mean, they all were, but he was like the rugged, really. And I think you look back on these, getting that start in Cheers, being the center of it, wanting to sort of zag away from that a little bit with Becker, and then getting to embody these fun supporting roles. The same thing is always there. I would again compare it to a Chevy Chase or a John Hamm post Mad Men, where it's funny how handsome I am.
Yes.
Like, it's like, I am that guy. Like, and it's not like anybody who's that handsome can do that. Of course, you need the comedic chops, you need the acting, but those guys are able to embody that thing of like, I'm gonna be a little bit of a buffoon. I'm going to legitimately charm you to an extent, but I'm willing to play the fool a little bit. And so then, they're so good at that by the time you get to the good place, it's just like you said, like now we know who this guy is, and it's a little bit like electing Ronald Reagan president or something. It's like we're ready to now like give this guy like authority and have him be the elder statesman that like we all sort of look to.
I flinched so hard when you just compared that to Ronald Reagan.
I'm not saying, only in certain ways, but yeah. And so I guess to me, that's like that's what makes him who he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm going to make my plea to you again to go back and just like stick with it and watch it all the way through to the end, because The Good Place to me is the best episode of TV that we got to watch in this lineup. And I really liked the Cheers episode, but the Cheers episode, like you were saying, was a Sam that we had seen so many times. And The Good Place truly is that turning point where we get to see Danson had been playing these like alternate versions of himself in guest appearances here and there and on Curb Your Enthusiasm. And in The Good Place, he just he goes back to acting, and it's so good.
Yeah, no, he is good. And you see, even you're saying all the spoilers that he's really lying and everything, but he sells.
I'm sorry to everyone out there. We're going to have to put so many spoiler warnings on this episode.
He sells that giddiness of I'm not supposed to tell you this, but this is actually my first time ever, architecting a neighborhood or whatever. And yeah, he's great in all of it. I've said my piece about why I didn't connect with that show, but I think in a lot of ways that is the best deployment of him. And again, I think we said our piece about Mr. Mayor, that it's kind of got all the component parts.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. I would have liked to, maybe throw this on in the afternoon once in a while and kind of binge 3 or 4 of them and, see how it is. Yeah, for me, Becker is a rock bottom for our podcast. That was really obnoxious. And like I said, the first half being like, oh, gee, another late 90s sitcom where everybody is mean to each other. Cool. And not really liking it for that. And then to find out that its ace in the hole is all this bullshit about, oh, he's secretly paying this child's medical bills. The character says at the end, you just may go to heaven, whether you like it or not.
Right.
Ugh, gag me with a spoon. Horrible.
I do remember watching Becker. I mean, look, it came out in 98. So it definitely was one of those that was sometimes it was probably just on in the house as I was around in the evening on school nights. But then I went off to college, so I wasn't watching a lot of it, But I do remember that it just had this sort of ho-hum charm. It was not a bad show. It was kind of like everything else, and Ted Danson was funny.
But that's the thing. So the reason why we haven't done the Becker rule until now, I think, is because, you say, sitcoms, TV shows in general, they need some time to find their footing, and that's true, but the flip side of that is you're making a TV show, right? You had this idea, you got all these people together.
The first one should be the best one, right?
Especially every time we sit down to watch a pilot episode, I'm always so keenly aware of that very first joke, that very first scene. Like, this should be the best that you've got. This should be your best stuff.
Yeah, it's usually the thing that got you the gig of having a show in the first place.
And so that's why I see this and I go like, there's kind of no excuse to be watching 22 minutes of the studio audience, quote unquote, laughing at him going like, hey, fuckface, you're ugly.
But remember what he was up against, right? The other shows that were on his same network at the time, because this was a CBS show. The shows that he was up against, CBS. You got freaking boring ass CBS old people shows and Ray Romano.
He's not up against them. They're his allies.
That's what I mean. But that's the kind of stuff that's coming in to
I know
and the King of Queens.
We're just going to have to agree to disagree. Ray Romano is freaking
Ray Romano, the comedian, is funny, but his show sucks.
I mean, it's better than this. And I'm not a fan, but it's better than this.
I mean, you're probably right. In the long run, you're probably right.
To me, it's a no-brainer in terms of the experience of watching these four. Cheers by a mile was the best one. And I'm curious, again, not having been really into Cheers, first time around as a kid, I'd like to watch a few more Rebecca episodes.
Oh, yeah.
And see how that plays out.
Well, which we will, right? Because we're going to do this once-a-year check-in where we do the Bar Wars. And we've got maybe we shouldn't do it once a year. Maybe we should do it a couple times a year and check back in.
Or we could just find her at another trope. But I'd like to see how that develops. Her Kathleen Turner voice, I think, the way it cracks once in a while is very fun. So, all right, we're a little wiser now and a little more familiar with Ted Danson. What are we talking about next week?
Next week, we are keeping sacred our third spaces. We are saving our hangouts. We're going to start with Webster, Season 2, Episode 12, Catherine Fights City Hall. Then Charles in Charge, Season 2, Episode 9, Pizza Parlor Protest. Saved by the Bell, also Season 2, Episode 3, Save the Max. And finally, Home Improvement, Season 8, Episode 21, A Hardware Habit to Break.
Yep, we're saving the hangouts next week, and until then, we will consider this segment of the sitcom study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.